Hopefully the sound will be a little bit better. I didn't have the microphone hooked up, but looking at life histories, what we want to do is look at how organisms deal. Now, let's talk about birthing, for instance. Life histories, there's two terms here. We have two plants that kind of have different techniques on how they breed. The first one is simulparity. That would be a century plant or a type of yucca. And what they do is they go all their life, they grow, and then they reproduce one time. And so what you're looking here is a big, huge flower. When this thing comes up, it'll drop all its seeds, and this plant below it will die. On the right here is the repeat reproduction, where they can reproduce every year, and that's heteroparity, and that would be types of palm trees. Yeah, so you can see the fruit underneath. So just to give you an idea on how plants can, or even animals, obviously we would be the repeat production for people. And so here's the information or the idea I want you to get out of this. Life histories are trade-offs. Everything we do it really comes down to energy, and there's all kinds of factors like adult, parent survival. How many kids do you have? What are the chances they'll survive? So lots of different things come into play. Now, this is a kestrel. This is a small falcon. And what you can see here is parent survival to the following winter. If they have a smaller brood size, brood is how many kids they have, chances are both parents will make it. The normal brood size puts a lot of energy on the parents raising the kids, so they don't survive as well, but they're going to get more kids out in the into the real world. And then the enlarged brood size, what you're seeing there is if you have lots and lots of kids, the kids may survive, but the adults survival rate is really, really low. And you can see that the males survival rate is lower than the females. Obviously, lots of it could be due to when the females are brooding, they may be more well protected. The males are taken off through predators. And then here it's just the amount of energy may be necessary to feed those young. So all kinds of different trade-offs. So you've got to make choices, and that's really what we want to do next. And there's two different types. One is called R-selected, and the other is K-selected. Those letters actually come from those equations from the last video. R-selected, again, R was R max, or biotic potential or intrinsic growth rate. And so what happens is if you choose this life history, what happens is these organisms will give a large number of offspring, but no parental care. You just lay a bunch of eggs and walk away. Typically, the young are very small in size. You don't want to invest too much in any one individual, and they usually have a short lifespan. And you'll see fish lay a bunch of eggs. Frogs will do the same thing, lay eggs. Even you can go sea turtles, although some of them have they have a long lifespan if they make it to adults, but very few make it to adults. So R-selected, what you're looking at is I'm putting all my energy into having young. And then I'm not going to really worry about putting any energy into supporting them, and hopefully some of them survive. Okay, the other side of the coin is the K-selected, and they do pretty much the opposite. What they do is small number of offspring, larger amount of parental care, and they tend to be larger in size. You invest more, and they usually have a longer lifespan. So humans would be definitely K-selected, along with anything that raises your young for 2 to 3 years. That is California condors are. I mentioned an endangered species early on, I think, and they are definitely K-selected. The babies hang with them for the first 4 or 5 years, typically. So anyway, and I want to make sure these are kind of the ends. There are species that kind of fall in between, but We want you to realize that organisms, over the evolutionary history have had choices, and they're trying to maximize their ability to get offspring into the next generation. The other thing I want you to think about here before we move on, it's not on the slides, is best case scenario for a ever-changing environment. So if you have lots of disturbance, which of these histories would you think would be better? And I want you to know that would be R-selected. R-selected works better because what will happen is if I have thousands of kids, they're all genetically different. If the environment is changing, the theory here is that one of those on the edges that may not normally have survived would survive in this new habitat. K-selected is probably the worst for changing environments because they usually have their offspring later in life. Like condors, they don't really breed till they're about 6 or 7. So the problem is your genetics are set in 2020, but the baby is when they become parents and are starting to breed, they're dealing with an environment that is 6 to 7 years later. And so what happens is they have a tendency to get pushed out and disappear. And what that means is if you look at the endangered species on this planet, most of them are large terrestrial mammals that are K-selected. Most of the cats, most of the big predators, because again, they're not adapting to these quick changes that humans are forcing. All right, determining equilibrium for population density, there are some density dependent and density independent factors. And so we want to talk about those and what those mean. And so density dependent means that it depends on how many organisms or individuals you have. So usually what happens is as you get more and more individuals in an area, density dependent factors start to make a difference. Competition for resources, so that starts limiting the number. Disease is another one. It's density dependent. If you have a cold and you're the only person in California, it doesn't matter. There's nobody to spread it to. But if you are, if you have the coronavirus and you're in a very small area, then all of a sudden it's going to spread rapidly. So that's why we're trying to keep people separate. Is diseases are density dependent. The buildup of waste, nobody can live in their own waste. Territoriality, having a territory, enough resources for you will be a limit. And then there are certain genetic mechanisms in place that will change behaviors and breeding patterns. Overcrowding, people tend to have less ovulation. And population dynamics. Here they're showing wolves and moose and the population numbers. And you can see that they're not really perfectly correlated. It was always, they were checking to see whether it was food or predators that were really kind of limiting moose. And it turned out a lot of it was the quality of food and weather that were shutting them. The wolves are obviously a factor. But you can see the wolves exploded and then took them down a bit. And then when the wolves were low, it was up. And sometimes it correlates fairly well. So it's not just the wolves, moose actually having this direct access on each other. Now, where the snowshoe hare and the lynx, on the other hand, these two are in sync. I mean, they have been doing this as one of the very famous studies they've been doing forever. And they found out that these are pretty much, the hares explode, the lynx explode, then the hares die down, and then the lynx follows suit. So two different things. So it might just be a predator-prey relationship, but it also could take in food and things like that. All right, and then we want to look at people and look at some different factors that might have to do with growth. And what you're seeing is the changes in populations and what that means. And so what you're seeing here is productive ages and where they're having kids. And so what happens is certain countries like Germany, Bulgaria and Russia, they're actually seeing an older population which isn't breeding and may not be producing for the economy, things like that. And so what that means is that that's becoming a heavy burden. Here we have stable Japan and Italy and Greece, where the numbers are fine, where the reproductive age are probably okay with the amount of old people to have. The United States, on the other hand, is we have a huge expanding youth. And then again, we're probably okay to take care of the old. And then we have some countries that are just exploding down here. So what we're trying to suggest, though, if you're looking at these countries and the numbers, which one of these would I expect to have a huge number? And that would actually be over here. These are countries that are going to grow. Now, the one thing that is keeping some of them in check is the high death rate that they have. But again, as we move on and try to get everybody with good health care and food, that could change, and we could have some population issues in some countries. Okay, and then we do have meta populations. So we talk about populations where we have small little types of populations, but what I want you to also understand is often there's immigration and emigration, and so the genes are flowing back and forth, so we get these huge meta populations of organisms. And so here we're showing you a type of butterfly in the different areas. But reality is we have these huge populations of certain organisms that do, and humans would be a meta population because of the way we can travel. All right, well, with that, we'll stop the share and stop the recording.